And I noticed out front they got a sign that says Hot Blues Group, or Hot Blues Legends. So I'd like to introduce the Hot Blues Legends to you. Because we got some. On the bass right here, he's originally from Rome, Georgia, along with Wes. They're from Rome, Georgia, but RW now lives in Sacramento, so he's part of the Golden State contingent of this. And RW has played with everybody from Carlene Carter to Gary Premich, Fingers Taylor, Mike Morgan and the Crow, and Lee McBee, and Ponty Bone and the Squeeze Tones. How about a big hand for RW Grigsby all day? And his old buddy, they've been playing together since high school in Rome, Georgia, and they played together off and on since then. That's why they sound so damn tight tonight on the rhythm section. This is one of the best rhythm sections in the blues world today, as far as I'm concerned. Wes Starr has played with just about everybody you can think of out of the great state of Texas, from Anson right here on stage, to Delbert McClinton, Marcia Ball, Asleep at the Wheel, Jimmy Vaughn, Omar and The Howlers, Junior Brown, all those groups he's played with and recorded with. How about a big hand for Wes Starr from Austin, Texas on the drum. And the two white shirts on the guitars with their white guitars. Oh, you have your gold guitar. Excuse me. Okay. All right. Anyway, on the Stratocaster right here, all the way from Dallas, Texas, ladies and gentlemen. He's had the Rocket since 1978. 20 years with the great Sam Myers. And Anson looked after him like nobody's business. He is a great blues man, a great guy, and he's a Texas legend in the state of Texas. He is a guitar legend. That's what I should say. I must have oatmeal for breakfast. How about a Anson Funderburgh on the guitar? And on the back biting old guitar right here, we have the leader of Little Charlie Nightcaster, 32 years, along with Rick Estrin. And alligator recording artist, guitar genius, Mr. Highwire himself. How about it for Little Charlie Baby, ladies and gentlemen? We're going to have these guys go to town on this next one. How about the Golden State All-Star Review?
So welcome, everyone. My name is Mark Hummel. This is Mark Hummel's Harmonica Party, and we are brought to you by our sponsors, Electrify Records, Seidel Harmonicas, and Mountaintop Records. Okay, so Wes, you started playing with Omar around 1979?
That's right, I moved out, started playing with him early in the year in 79. And the band at the time was a 5-piece. And after about a year and a half, we took a break, and when we came back, we decided to go to a 3-piece for different reasons. The guitar player wanted, the other guitar player, Pharaoh, wanted to leave and started another band he was interested in doing, and the sax player wanted to go back to teaching, and so we became a 3-piece band, which it took a lot of work because, as you know, with 3 people up there, it's not that you have to cover so much ground, it's just learning how to do it. You know, you don't have to play every note. It's about making the space work for you. And so our sound changed, and it was a little struggle early on, but that's where Fingers Taylor came in, because he's from Mississippi, southern Mississippi, Hattiesburg, which is close to where Omar grew up, and of course grew up playing all the clubs in Hattiesburg. So he had known Fingers. And I knew about him, of course, with his many years playing with Jimmy Buffett, and I had seen him, you know, as a teenager playing with Buffett, and then Larry Raspberry, and I think I'd had him on where he played on some James Taylor records, so I was real familiar with him. Mm-hmm. But I didn't quite understand, because I knew what type of stuff we were doing, you know, just low down blues, you know, with this little tweely Jimmy Buffett stuff would sound like on it. And little did I know what kind of player he was. So he met us the first date down at a little club in Baton Rouge called Chiefs, which all the Chicago bands played. Chief had, could only see 80, 90 people in there. I mean, that would be full. And he had like Albert Collins here. I mean, just all the Chicago guys played there. We played Chiefs, and Fingers showed up, and somebody dropped him off, and he had 2 amps, and he was going to be in the van with us for a month. And I'd never seen anything like it in my life. And I knew Kim, and I knew some
Right.
good harp players,
Right.
but his showmanship was, he'd been all the way over backwards.
Oh, yeah.
His head
Yeah,
touching
yeah,
the
yeah.
back
Oh,
before.
yeah. Yeah,
And
yeah. He was very elastic.
incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He was very much of a Southern harmonica player. That
Yeah.
would be my take on Fingers.
Yeah, I mean, he's, you've got guys, like Mickey Raphael that play that romantic type
Right.
of harp. And then you got, Kim Wilson and these other hardcore blues players. And then Fingers could do both
Right.
really well.
Yeah.
And so we played the gig, and we were going to meet there. He was going to go off with some friends, and we were going to meet there the next morning at 10 and load up the van. Well, about 12:30, he finally shows up, and we'd already packed his gear up. And when we were packing his amps out, all sort of paraphernalia were falling out the back of his amp. I won't say what, but all sorts of stuff, bags of this and that, and bottles.
I've seen all that. Yeah.
And we got him all packed up, and we're sitting there waiting for him. Of course, before cell phones, so we could call him. Didn't know who to
Right.
call. So this car comes swerving in the parking lot. The door opens, and he kind of gets not shoved out, but kind of get out. And there's two ladies in there. Let's get the hell out of here. And he'd been out with these two gals all night, and that's basically how it all started.
I've seen him in action.
Yep. And
Yep.
and because of that, Fingers went to make his first record.
And you were on it.
And I was on it. I was played drums on half of it, and then Anson Funderburgh and
Right.
the Rockets were on the other half. And I had met Anson when I was playing with Omar the year before. We did a big festival that was sponsored by a club in Austin called Huts Diner.
Right.
And they did
Hamburgers, right?
Yeah, Hamburger Place. Been
right.
around since 1939.
Yeah.
And they did this blues festival down on Town Lake, and I mean everybody, the Cobras, Stevie, everybody played.
Yeah.
All the blues people were in town, and all the East Side guys, and then it was an incredible festival. And I think it cost $3 to get in, to hear all these acts. And it was a wonderful festival. But that's where I met Anson, and the first time. And then the next thing I know, I'm getting a call to come up and do this record that Fingers was doing.
Right.
And that was kind of the beginning of mine and Anson's relationship, and with Fingers, and through the years with Fingers, because he kept going back with Buffett, but he was really wanted to do his own thing, and through the years, I believe I played on all but one of his solo records.
Wow.
I think the one I didn't play on is one Kim produced, because they were up in Detroit at the time,
Right,
and
right,
used
right,
Doug
right.
Deming's
Oh,
guys.
I remember that.
And which
I
is a
remember
really
that.
good record.
That's a really good record.
It's really
yeah.
good. But we had one big time record on the MCA Records that we did at
Yeah,
Jimmy
I
Buffett's
have that.
studio.
Yeah.
Chest Pains.
Right, I have that.
And it was quite the experience. And I really got to know Jimmy. And Jimmy he didn't push himself on anybody, because he was more the executive producer than producer. But everything that he suggested was good, and he didn't suggest a lot. And he had really good ideas. And at the end of being in the studio for 10 days, and it's the first time I've ever been in the studio where the goal for the day was to record one song.
Yeah,
I was like,
God.
I usually do
That's
albums in
incredible,
a day.
I know.
'Cause
That's
we had this
incredible.
elaborate budget.
Yeah.
So, and it was in that interesting period of well, we were on a big label, so it wanted to be kind of modern. The whole drum machine thing was coming about and stuff.
Right.
So when I was hitting a drum, it was triggering some other sound. So on some songs, I'm really only playing the cymbals, because they hadn't, the sound of electronic cymbals hadn't come to age yet.
Right.
Because of the wave in the cymbals. They sounded really cheesy.
Yeah.
Well, so the drums, but that was the fad in the 80s, when we did that. I went with it, and I learned a lot. It taught me yet another lesson, in the studio, where I kind of had to, instead of resist it, trying to learn how to do that stuff.
Yeah.
And
I remember Fingers having, because of the Buffett band, that he kind of met all these great musicians out of that band. Because I remember having the Memphis Horns. One time he brought down on one of our gigs in San Francisco, or Cropper, or I mean,
Yeah, he was
all
always
these big people like
Keith
Mac
Sykes, Amazing
McAnally
Rhythm
and-
Aces guys,
Yeah,
all these guys.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've met all those guys. You know, I mean, he knew everybody. I
He
mean,
did. I
you
mean,
know,
Fingers knew
and
everybody.
he would usually
Yeah.
people he'd invite down were the guys that would fit into what we were doing. You know,
Right.
So I mean, because that's what he wanted to do because he did all
Yeah.
that other stuff.
Yeah.
So it was fun.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, Anson's the one that introduced me to Fingers in 1986, and it was like me and Fingers got to be really good friends, like right away, because we were both, you know, sober, and it was, and then there's also the Sam connection,
Yeah.
the Sam and Anson connection through Fingers.
Right.
That's how Sam Myers ended up in Anson's band.
Right.
And a lot of people are not aware that it was Fingers and Sam that were playing together, and that was how, you know,
Yeah.
he got his attention. Basically, Fingers got Anson's attention.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
Check this guy out.
Yeah, I mean, you know, then they had that band for a while where Sam would play drums half the set,
Right.
and then the other half set, Fingers would get off harp and go back to play
Right.
drums.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
and it's like,
I heard some great stories about those days, like when they were playing these really funky juke joints around Jackson
Yeah,
and stuff. Yeah. We're talking to Wes Starr, and we're going to talk a little bit about how Wes ended up playing with Jimmy Vaughn out of Austin, Texas, and eventually made records with Omar Dykes and Jimmy Vaughn together on the Jimmy Reed Highway, 2 albums?
yeah, there was basically 2 albums. The way it started is Omar said he was recording some Jimmy Reed stuff and wanted me to be involved in it. And he had already been in the studio with Jay Moeller, who had been playing drums with Kim,
Right.
and the Fabulous Thunderbirds, and Gary Primage and Gary Clark Jr. And then he invited Jimmy Vaughn in. And then Jimmy had all these ideas and was totally into it. It was wonderful. It blossomed from this idea of Omar into this big kind of production thing. And the songs really got great treatment because he brought in Kim Wilson, he brought in James Cotton, of course Gary Clark Jr., they had Derek O'Brien, Lou Ann Barton, Ronnie James on bass.
Didn't Delbert play on?
Delbert McClinton. So that was the initial group of players. And they put out a record on Rough Records.
Okay.
And it got
Right.
a lot of attention. And then we got asked to do it Austin City Limits. So that brought all those players who may not even seen each other in the studio because they did their parts remotely
Right.
or whatever, all together. And it's the first time Kim and Jimmy had played together since Jimmy left the T-Birds.
Wow.
And we were going to do some live dates, so we all were kind of seeing how that was going to go. And they were more than just polite to each other. Because we had to do rehearsals. We did a couple live radio shows, some interviews over at the ACL studio for the radio program. Did a little acoustic live set there while we were down in the main room rehearsing for the TV show the day before. But, you know, once again, being around, you know, seeing all these guys interact, you know, with James Cotton there and Delbert there and you know, all the different relationships.
Right.
It was a wonderful thing. In the show, we rehearsed just enough so we didn't quite know everything right. So
Right.
that left it open-ended as playing that style of music. We like that.
Right.
You have the basic framework.
You want it to be a little bit rough.
A little rough.
Yeah.
And that's where the magic happens, and particularly in that kind of music. So it went over so well, and we did tour. Sometimes we didn't have everybody, like we went over, did the Notodden Festival in Norway, and Delbert was our harp player for that.
Wow.
And then also, a lot of people don't know it, but for that style of music, Jimmy's a wonderful harp player. And so,
Right.
and so
Sure
is
is.
Omar.
Sure is,
You know,
yeah.
for that style of
Yeah,
stuff. And
yeah.
so we did that, and the album created a lot of attention for all good reasons. You know, it was radio friendly enough where it got airplay.
Right.
And so that, you know, stuff like that is good for newer generations. You know, when that pops up on an FM station, something like that.
Right.
So it did a lot of good things, and it sold well. So, and we did, like I said, we did some live shows on the West Coast, the East Coast, and I think Texas and Florida. I can't remember where all, but you know, for about a year and a half, we that was what I was involved in. And then Omar wanted to do a follow-up record, and it's called Big Town Playboy. And we expanded it where we did a little bit more than just Jimmy Reed. It was bulk of it was Jimmy Reed, but
some Eddie Taylor,
more Eddie Taylor stuff. And the band was scaled down a little bit. We still had James Cotton. We didn't have Kim or we didn't have Delbert, but we had Lazy Lester.
Ah, okay, and Lester's a natural for that.
And that was, to me, that's a very special record. The way we recorded it.
So it was 3 or 2?
That was 2.
2.
That was the second record.
Right.
And the way we recorded it, Jimmy had this concept, and it really came into effect because I had a tragedy. My brother passed away the day we went in the studio. And we took a break until I could figure out what I wanted to do. And I came in and said, I don't need to be anywhere for a couple of days. Can we do this in the next 2 days? And so Jimmy had this concept that him and Derek pulled their amps into the main room instead of being baffled off, put them right next to the drums, and both those guys were right in my face. So we made all the tracks, 2 guitars, Omar singing and me playing drums. Then we added Ronnie later and the harps.
Right.
And,
that's a happening way to do it.
And it was, and the thing was, because I was pretty emotional.
Yeah.
What was going on.
Right.
And those guys pulled me through it because, you know, Jimmy losing his brother Stevie, Omar just losing his wife.
Sure.
And, you know, so I was in there with these very passionate people with what was going on.
Right.
And so the record has a special place in my heart for me. Because, and a lot of it was done on first takes for most of the album, once again. A few of the songs, you know, we'd have to stop because I just couldn't make it through it.
Yeah.
You know, and have to stop, take a little break, and come back, and then we'd nail it.
Yeah.
But and the record, because it didn't have Jimmy's name on it, but we still toured behind it. We still did some stuff. But that went on. The total of that whole conglomeration of people was 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Then Omar called me up and said, "Hey, what do you think about doing the trio again?" We called Bruce, who had kind of like given up music for quite a few years, but we knew he was back playing some. He just got burned out, the original bass player with Omar. So we called him up, and we kind of had a residency once or twice a month at the Saxon Pub, real famous club in Austin.
Right. That's where I first saw you.
And we had so much fun. I mean, it was fun again.
Yeah.
And so we did that for quite a while, and then I got Omar wanting to record some more stuff. But going back to the Jimmy Reed Highway Project, all that stuff that he had originally recorded with Gary Primage and Gary Clark Jr. and Jay Muller, he put out another album a couple years later of all that stuff, which that's a wonderful record.
Yeah.
And I think it's called Too Much Not Enough, I think, or something like that.
Okay.
But it's all the stuff that we didn't use.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And so I'm really glad that he did that. But we started doing the trio thing and did that for quite a while. And then had Ronnie James do some dates with us. And so that was and Elmar started writing a lot prolifically like he always has. And we recorded, I think we did 3 more Omar and The Howlers records after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of records. Yeah.
And so, I did the first album with Omar, and then 25 years went by, and then I did 5 albums in about 5 years.
That's
with
amazing.
him.
Yeah. So was that the early 2000s?
2011, I think.
Oh, okay.
Or 2010.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when I did the first tour with you and RW.
Right. It was around that period.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you did the Dylan tour, was that with Junior Brown?
That was with Junior Brown.
Okay.
And it was it was really neat, and everybody was excited about it because you had 4 acts. You had Bob Dylan and his band that had Tony Levin playing bass, who had been in the Wheel and was in Austin for a long time. Denny Freeman on guitar.
Wow.
And then the catering company was from Austin. The sound company was from Austin. Junior Brown from Austin, and Jimmy Vaughn
Wow.
Came on stage, before Dylan. And Alana James was the opening act, who was based out of Austin, and she played with Dylan, I want to say, for 3 or 4 years, and on 1 or 2 of his records.
She the fiddle player.
Fiddle
Right.
player, yeah.
Right.
And so it was this Austin package.
Oh, wow.
So it was a treat to be out there, because it was a lot of, there wasn't any uptightness or,
Right.
everybody minded their P's and Q's, but we had a lot of fun.
Right. How long was the tour?
7 or 8 weeks.
7 or 8 weeks?
Yeah, and he would play, it was in the baseball season, so he would play in different parts of the country, minor league ballparks, and places that would hold, 8 to 15,000 people max,
Right.
And so it was a lot of fun.
That sounds really fun. The other thing I wanted to get back to is you rejoined Anson kind of toward the end of the time that Sam was around.
Right, yeah, it was the time. Once again, the timing was good, because I was in Nashville for 9 years, and
Right.
5 I was with Hal Ketchum, and then about another 2.5, 3 was with Delbert, and then me and some other guys, road players, we'd all gotten off the road about the same time. I just had my 4th kid, and so we would get together every week, and we formed this band called the Paramours, and we'd write stuff, and we kind of did a run with that for a couple years and had some success. And we had been talking about getting back to Austin, because I had 2 sons in Austin who would come up and spend every summer with me through the years. And we thought, they were at the age we thought it'd be good to get back to Austin. And so moved back to Austin, and 1 week after I'd been there a couple months and got settled in, I had actually joined a band called Sisters Morales, who both these ladies grew up in Spain. So their Spanish, when they sang, was the most beautiful, elegant Spanish you ever heard. And most of the songs we did were in Spanish, and I'd already rehearsed with them for a week. And then after about a week, Joe Eda called me up and said, "We're doing a Flatlanders record, I want you to be on it, and we'll probably promote it and go out and tour, and it'd be a year or 2 of your time. Are you interested?" I said, "I can't do it. I just joined Sisters Morales," which he was aware of who they were.
Right.
And then the next day, Anson called. And I said, "Absolutely," because I've been wanting that gig for so long,
right. Wow.
Because of our history.
Yeah.
And Danny Cochran had been the drummer for 10 years. Well, him and Pat Whitefield left at the same time after
Right.
both of them being in the band 10 years. So me and Johnny Bradley, who had been working with Mike Morgan, because my end of the stint in Nashville, I was going back and forth to Texas to play with Mike, and Johnny was a young bass player playing with Mike.
Who's now with Gary Clark
Who's
Jr.
been with Gary Clark for now
Right.
5, 6 years. But this is when he was just learning. It was like a puppy dog in the blues.
Right.
But a wonderful man. And so anyway, Anson called both of us. So we basically went from Mike Morgan's band, and I'm down in Austin now, and we joined at the same time. And Sam was still, on top of it. Not in his prime, but he still had a lot to offer. And I, of course, stayed with him till Sam got to the point where he could not sing anymore, and that's when we brought in John Namath.
Right, I remember that.
It's, because of that, that's how I got to know John.
Right.
Actually,
you did some tours with him, too.
Yeah, actually.
And records.
I played with Nick Moss off and on for a few years.
That's right, yeah,
and
with Bob.
And then
Bob Welsh
that's how I
was
met
there.
Bob
Right.
Welsh. And then anyway, so Nick had brought in this guy I never heard of, John Namath, to sing for a week's worth of dates. And after our first show in Chicago, I think it was at the Blues Festival, I got on a phone call to Anson and said, "I found us a singer."
Right.
And that's how that kind of went down.
Yeah, I remember Anson called me and he asked me about John.
Yeah. So he started inquiring about John,
Right.
And so anyway, but we had Sam and John, and then it got to where Sam couldn't, it was too hard on him.
Right.
And so John was kind of the replacement, and we still had commitments for the next year or so. So we used James Harmon for a tour,
Right, that's
for
right.
all our summer festival dates, and a couple different people, and still do stuff with Anson, and then
Right.
of course that leads us into
Right, Golden State Lone Star.
Yeah.
So So initially, the way that started was that me and you and RW started doing tours 2010, 2011. And
Right.
we had some tours with Josh Falero.
Josh Falero, who's in Austin now.
Yeah, and then also Mike Morgan was on some of those.
That's right.
And then eventually, I think I asked you, I said, well, do you think, because I started playing with Charlie, Rusty Zinn had left the band, and I started hiring little Charlie just kind of by chance because Rusty couldn't make a gig, and that's kind of how I started working with him. And once we started working together, I asked you if Anson might be interested. And I think you had approached Anson, and then I dialogued with Anson about it, and he goes like, well, I've known Charlie forever, but I think he's only said 2 words to me in 20 years.
That's about right.
Yeah. I booked a tour. I think we had 3 festivals that first tour.
Yeah.
We started in California, went and did an East Coast gig, and then flew off to Europe for
That's right.
5 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that.
long.
Yeah.
With little Charlie, the way I met Charlie was on. We were doing Legendary Blues Cruise,
Right.
And little Charlie and Nightcats were on it,
Right.
And we hosted the, as a lot of the bands do, host the jam,
The jam
out
night.
on the deck,
Right.
And me and Curtis Sagato had really got close on the boat,
Right.
because we'd done some stuff with Nick Moss together,
Yeah.
up in the Northwest, so. Curtis wanted to get up and play, and then little Charlie and Rick wanted to get up, and Charlie wanted to play with me, and
Right.
while Anson was still on stage too, he
Right.
wanted to play with that feel the band had.
Right.
And so that's the only time I'd ever played with Charlie until jump ahead to when we
Right.
started playing together.
Right.
But it was a good first meeting.
Yeah.
And
It's interesting just how that goes.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the first impressions make such a big difference. And I'd known Charlie since, God, I met him like before I met Rick, actually, because I played with a drummer and a guitar player that played in his first band. And I went to go see Charlie in Sacramento at a little club called the Aero Club, and Kenny Blue Ray was on guitar
really,
back then. Yeah, Charlie just blew harp mainly.
that's right.
Yeah, so Charlie was playing harmonica. He played maybe 4 songs a night on guitar, and he played harp. And on the break, I met him, and he goes, "Oh, you play harp, huh?" He goes, "What do you say we do a head cutting contest?"
Yeah, that's Charlie.
I went, whoa. So I became much better friends with Rick, and then, but eventually, me and Charlie kind of got to know each other a little bit. Mainly when his wife died, and I sent him a note, and he sent me back a very nice note about it, you know, and we sort of became better friends. So. You know.
Well, by the time we got to when we were in Chicago and we did the cuts that are on the album, I remember that moment so well. Being in the studio, I have just a really good recollection of that whole day. I know Charlie was a little under the weather, which I think probably worked in our favor.
Right.
Because he was, nursing his cold and just was kind of, doing his thing. But the studio was comfortable. We were at a certain point in the tour where we weren't burnt out, but we were really warmed up.
Right.
And it was real easy to play.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, most of those cuts were done in 1, 2, or 3 takes.
Yeah.
And,
Sure did.
everything pretty much stuck.
Yeah, I agree.
And we were just at the point in our playing together, amount of time we've been together, and then just everything just kind of lined up. And
it worked. Yeah. And then when we came back and did the second album, that was really Anson producing it, and
the Kids.
What's that?
At Kid Anderson's.
At Kid Anderson's, right, in San Jose. And I love that album. I think that album, I was telling you, I thought Anson did just a superb job of producing that album.
And, when you told me, because all I'd heard was, I think when you picked us up at the airport or something, you dropped us off the hotel and said, "Oh, and we have a keyboard player." And I was going, "What?" And you drove off. I was going, "What? A keyboard player?"
Right.
And I had no idea.
Right.
And it was going to be Jim Pugh.
Right.
And when we went in the studio and Jim was sitting right there, I was in hog heaven, as they say. I mean, it was because I have a lot of respect for him. I've seen him so many times through the years, playing with Robert Cray. And
Right.
I just had a lot of respect, and I think he just added a lot to that
And
record.
I think you guys ended up, didn't you? You and Anson do some stuff with him after that?
Yeah, Anson.
Like in Austin or something?
Yeah, because Anson produced 3 or 4 records that he had me and Jim Pugh.
Right.
John Del Toro,
Yeah.
Richardson record. Ramirez.
Jose Ramirez's album, yeah.
which has done really, really well. And then we did Andy T.
Right, that's right.
And so it's, so we have some experience together, and to me it was just real easy. The hardest thing was kind of choosing what we were going to do.
Right.
You know.
Charlie wasn't a fan of a couple songs that I picked, but
Well, yeah.
yeah. But that's how it went.
Well, that's how it went.
Yeah.
Well, he just, he spoke his opinion, and he spoke it loudly. If that's not, he didn't like it, and but he would end up going along with it. But that's just, and I mean, I understand that. Don't necessarily agree with it, but I get it.
Right. But I thought Anson did a marvelous job on
I agree.
producing that album.
He's become such a
He is a great producer. He
Yeah.
really is. Yeah. So so let's go ahead and take a break and then come back and play some. Here we go, Honest I Do by Jimmy Reed. Don't you know that I love you? Honest I do. I could never place no one but you. Please tell me you love me. Stop driving me mad. When I woke up this morning, never felt so bad. Don't you know that I love you? Stop driving me mad. You're the sweetest little woman that I ever had. enough for jazz, as they say.